Hi everyone and welcome to this video, the next in our series on Durcan. In this video we're going to look at the Durcan poem The Girl with the Keys to Pearse's Cottage. First we will look at some background to make the poem a bit more accessible, then we'll look at it line by line before summing up with some of the features of the poem that you can discuss in your essays. Don't forget to download the quiz from the link in the description below and use that after you've watched this video. The first place to start is with the title of the poem and the person named in it. Paul Durcan Pearse was one of the leaders of the 1916 Easter Rising, and he was also a school teacher in Dublin. He used to run a school in a cottage in the Gaeltacht in Galway, and he would bring students there in the summer. The cottage that is referred to in this poem is that cottage. It has been restored and is now a tourist attraction. Pearse, as one of the leaders of the 1916 Rising, can be credited as one of the forefathers of the Irish state as we know it today. The rising that he led eventually led to the founding of the Irish state. It was Pearse who read out the proclamation of independence at the beginning of the Rising, the document that set out what a free Ireland would value and cherish. This is important as there's a suggestion in this poem that if Pearse was to see the Ireland of today, or the Ireland of the 70s that Durcan is writing in, he wouldn't recognise it as the one that he had in mind when reading out the proclamation outside the GPO at the beginning of the Rising. If this is what Durcan is doing, offering a criticism of Irish society, then it would fit well with Durcan's other poetry that often criticises the hypocrisy in Irish society. Of course, the poem is many things and can be examined on a number of levels. Let's start though by reading through the poem itself. When I was 16, I met a dark girl. Her hair was darker because her smile was so bright. She was the girl with the keys to Pearse's cottage, and her name was Cottage. The cottage was built into the side of a hill. I recall two windows and a cosmic piece of bare brown rooms, and on whitewashed walls photographs of the passionate and pale Pearse. I recall wet thatch and peeling jams, and how all was best seen from below in the field. I used to sit in the rushes with ledger, book and pencil, compiling poems of passion for Cottage. Often she used to linger on the sill of a window, hands by her side and brown legs akimbo, in sun-red skirt and moon-black blazer, looking toward our strange world wide-eyed. Our world was strange because it had no future. She was America bound at summer's end. She had no choice but to leave her home, the girl with the keys to Pearse's cottage. O Cottage, you have gone with your keys from your own native place, yet here in this dark, El Greco eyes blaze back from your Connemara postman's daughter's proudly mortal face. Okay, so if we look at stanza 1 in particular, when I was 16 I met a dark girl. Her hair was darker because her smile was so bright. She was the girl with the keys to Pearse's cottage and her name was Cottage. The poem opens in a really clear and coherent way. The speaker is explaining to us that he met a dark-haired girl when he was 16. She was the girl with the keys to Paul Durcan Pearse's cottage, and she would open it for visitors who came to see it. Her name, as we are told, is Cottage. There's a definite suggestion that the speaker is enamoured or thinks he's in love with this girl. The description of her dark hair and her bright smile, she's clearly made an impression on this 16-year-old. Stanza 2. The cottage was built into the side of a hill. I recall two windows and a cosmic piece of bare brown rooms, and on whitewashed walls photographs of the passionate and pale Pearse. In this stanza, we have a physical description of the cottage, but in the second line there's an interesting juxtaposition. Juxtaposition is a technique whereby a poet puts two contrasting images or ideas side by side in order to surprise the reader or to achieve a particular effect. In this line, there's the very ordinary description of the two windows. We can see that clearly in our mind's eye. But that is contrasted with the cosmic peace the speaker recalls. Where the windows are ordinary, the peace he experiences in the cottage is cosmic. It's on a scale that is out of this world. In the next line, the poet's use of alliteration focuses us once again on the description, the bare brown rooms and the whitewashed walls. And this technique is continued into the last line where we are told there about the photographs of the passionate and pale Pearse. The reference to passionate here is obviously a reference to his passion and commitment to Irish independence. Stanza 3. I recall wet thatch and peeling jams, and how all was best seen from below in the field. I used to sit in the rushes with ledger, book and pencil, compiling poems of passion for Cottage. In this stanza, the speaker continues the description of the cottage, but these descriptions have a hint of negativity to them. The thatch roof, the straw that keeps the inside of the cottage dry and warm, is wet, and the doorways and the window frames are peeling. It's better, the speaker says, to see the cottage from a distance. Perhaps he is suggesting that, like many things, it's best not to inspect them too closely, in case you find things that might disappoint you. This cottage is best seen from below in the field. Either way, he doesn't care much for the cottage anyway. He sits away from the cottage in the long grass, writing poems for the dark-haired girl we met in stanza 1. The alliteration in Poems of Passion hints that this is what he truly cares about, rather than Pearse's cottage. Stanza 4. Often she used to linger on the sill of a window, hands by her side and brown legs akimbo, in sun-red skirt and moon-black blazer, looking toward our strange world wide-eyed. So here we have a lovely image of the boy sitting in the field below the cottage, looking up at the object of his affection, this girl, sitting on a windowsill, her legs flung out haphazardly. The contrast of her red skirt and black blazer completes the image as we see her wide-eyed looking not at the speaker but out to the world itself. This is not a two-way infatuation. There's not even a suggestion that Cottage shares his interest or that she's even aware of him. All of the descriptions are one-sided. Aside from her brown legs and the description of her clothing, she barely even seems human. The alliteration of world wide-eyed makes her seem almost like a frightened animal. Stanza 5. Our world was strange because it had no future. She was America bound at summer's end. She had no choice but to leave her home, the girl with the keys to Pearse's cottage. In this stanza, we learn why the world was strange to her, because it had no future. This world has no future because she has to leave it at the end of the summer. She's moving to America, presumably because she can't find work or opportunities in Ireland. While we've had immigration in recent years in Ireland, the 70s was a time of huge levels of immigration, with thousands and thousands of Irish people leaving to go to the UK and America to find work. The repetition of the line, the girl with the keys to Pearse's cottage, at this point brings me back to something I said earlier when talking about the background to the poem. On one level, the poem is about lost love, a teenage crush that goes nowhere. He obsesses about this girl, but she must leave, so there is no future for them. However, on a more metaphorical level, this poem could be about Ireland itself. Cottage has the keys to Pearse's cottage. We could take this to mean that she embodies Pearse and his beliefs about Ireland. Remember, Pearse was the one to read the Proclamation of Independence. One particular part of the proclamation says, "The Republic guarantees religious and civil liberty, equal rights and equal opportunities for all its citizens, and declares its resolve to pursue the happiness and prosperity of the whole nation, cherishing all the children of the nation equally." Contrast this idealistic language with the images of thousands of Irish people leaving the country on planes and boats like Cottage, not out of a desire to leave, but out of necessity. Durcan is pointing out the failures of Irish society to live up to the expectations of someone so committed to Ireland's freedom as Pearse was. So on that deeper metaphorical level, Durcan is criticising the failure of the Irish state in the 70s to live up to the ideals of those who died for her freedom. The last stanza in particular hammers home this point. Stanza 6. O Cottage, you have gone with your keys from your own native place. Yet here in this dark, El Greco eyes blaze back from your Connemara postman's daughter's proudly mortal face. The repetition in the first line creates a plaintive or a sad tone. The speaker is calling after her, but she's already left. He says that she has gone with the keys from her native place. She should be able to stay here. There should be opportunities for her in her own country, but there isn't. It's interesting that she has taken the keys with her. Perhaps this is an acknowledgement that Pearse's vision of Ireland is also gone. The last two lines signal an interesting ending to the poem. There's sadness on two levels. The boy has lost the object of his affection, and Ireland loses her sons and daughters to emigration as a result of its failures to live up to the expectations of those who gave up their lives for her. But the second last line begins with yet. So there may still be hope. We are told, here in this dark, and he is referring to Ireland there, in the dark, El Greco eyes blaze back. As we've seen in previous poems of Durcan's, and I go into more detail on this in my introduction to Durcan video, and there's a link to that in the description, Durcan is a very visual poet and a great lover of the visual arts, painting and cinema among others. The painter referenced here, El Greco, is Dominikos Theotokopoulos. He was famous for painting dark expressive eyes on his figures, eyes that seem to communicate the emotion of the figure to the viewer of the painting. Here, Cottage is looking back towards Ireland with these expressive dark eyes. And not just looking back, but her eyes blaze back. The verb blaze here suggests defiance, that despite the current state of things, perhaps there's a better future possible, despite the actions of many of those in power in society and government. The last line returns us to the real world from the metaphor of Cottage representing an idealised version of Ireland, and we are told that she is simply the daughter of a postman from Connemara, and that she is mortal. So some of the poetic techniques that we could look at. This poem uses the metaphor of Cottage representing Pearse's vision of Ireland, or an idealised version of Ireland, to criticise the Ireland of the 70s, the Ireland that Durcan lived in. She has been driven from her native land for want of opportunity. It also, on a literal, surface level, details a story of unrequited love. This too could be a hint at the poet's own feelings towards his country. Durcan is the grandnephew of Major John McBride, another of the leaders of the 1916 rebellion. Durcan is a critic of Irish society and its many flaws, but he is also a proud Irishman, and many of his poems detail his feeling for rural Ireland and its people. The unrequited love here could perhaps be a reflection of the conflict he feels when examining his own feelings about Ireland. The poem is made up of 6 unrhymed quatrains, 4-line stanzas. One of the only places where we see rhyme used is in the last stanza, where the second and fourth, the last line of the poem, rhyme. Durcan doesn't often use rhyme in his poems, and so we pay attention to this. It rounds off the poem nicely and it gives it a sense of completion. I hope that you found this video useful. Make sure to take a look at some of the other videos on Durcan's poetry on the channel, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet. Please also leave a comment, a suggestion, or any other feedback that you wish.